Good morning, everybody, and welcome back to the Celtic Way morning briefing for Friday, the 8th of September. My name is Ryan McGinlay. My Twitter handle, or X handle, is the Ryan McGinlay, and today I'm delighted to be joined by a special guest, Alan Morrison of Celtic by Numbers and the Huddle Breakdown. Alan, good morning. How are you doing?
Yeah, very good, thanks. It's not got too hot here yet, but I'm I'm sitting still, so I don't get too sweaty.
Yeah, it's definitely very, very hot just now. I think I've picked the wrong clothes to wear on a Friday morning, especially in this heat. You just pull stuff on for the podcast. Um, yeah, it's absolutely roasting here. It seems as if the summer has finally came at the at the late month of September, but we can't complain. Any good weather's good weather in Scotland.
No,
We get
and
enough
then
rubbish
we're
weather. So.
absolutely, and the glow of last weekend is still emanating. So
Exactly.
you've got that as
Lovely. I
well.
love that, Alan. I love that segue into Celtic matters. Yeah, because we could talk about the weather all day. I know that people could moan about the weather all day, but we're here to talk about Celtic. It's everything to do with Celtic. I think everybody's still buzzing about the result last Sunday. It was one of those um, big statement wins. I think it will kickstart Brendan Rodgers' career or his second career at Celtic. But before we get into things, if I could just ask everybody to have a wee look at the ticker tape down at the bottom of the screen. If you subscribe to the Celtic Way, you'll be supporting top quality football journalism covering the club you love. If you visit www.celticway.co.uk/subscribe, we've also got two apps, one in the Google Play Store and in the Apple App Store. If you type in the Celtic Way in either one of those, you'll get access to a mobile app that optimizes your phone basically for the Celtic Way. So it's the easiest way to get your articles on the phone. I know how sometimes it can be a nightmare with Chrome or Safari to optimize the website, but it looks so much better on the app. If you type in the Celtic Way on either store, then you'll be able to get it, and it's a lot easier to view our articles that myself, that Alan has done. Tony's did articles on there as well. Stuart Ross with his scouting pieces and his match analysis pieces. Anything that you could look for in terms of Celtic journalism, it's on the site. So if you visit www.celticway.co.uk/subscribe, we'll really appreciate it. Also, if you are feeling even more generous, then please subscribe to the YouTube channel. The growth in the past month has been absolutely incredible with the amount of subscribers we've got. It really does help us continue to do the free videos and the pre-recorded videos, both live and pre-recorded, if you subscribe. So if you click the subscribe button at the bottom of the screen, then you'll really be helping us with regard to the YouTube channel. We appreciate your support. We couldn't do it without you, and please continue to support us, and we'll bring the best content that we can. So, Alan, before we talk into sort of like a review of the season so far, there was a bit of a big moment last night for one of Celtic's players. There was a lot of talk of him before he arrived, being at Gangwon FC. I'm talking about Yang Hyun-jun, Celtic's winger, who I think's been one of the bright sparks of the season so far in cameo roles. He had that one start, and I thought he was one of the better players on the park on the day against St Johnstone. But he made his South Korea debut last night against Wales in an international friendly. I think that just shows you he must feel vindicated already with his move to join Celtic, because he's already getting considered for the national team. I know he had under 23 caps for South Korea before, but it seems that move to Celtic has prompted Jurgen Klinsmann to throw him straight into the national team. So more good news for Celtic in that regard.
Yeah, no, pleased for him. I think he was on the bench but didn't get on. But yeah, no, listen, it's a big landmark for any player. So yeah, good news for him. We've not seen a lot of the kid, obviously. It was interesting that he was selected against St Johnstone to start, which again is a big moment for him. And like you say, I agree, he was one of the brighter players. Where I think one of the areas I think Celtic have struggled a little bit this season is in the wide areas, where you know last season we predominantly had what I thought said was a really good balance when Jota played between sort of a winger that was looking to try and get in behind, usually Maeda, and then a winger that was prepared to come short and get on the ball a lot. But once Jota got the ball, he was always looking to go forward. We've had two wingers who really are not as comfortable getting the ball out wide and certainly further from goal, and have tended to kind of cut back and play very safe passes. So Yang, when he played against St Johnstone, was noticeable because when he got the ball, he was looking to drive forward a lot. We've not seen a lot of him. He did well. He was very positive. Possibly he was a little bit predictable into some of his runs. They didn't sort of vary. He got the ball and he kind of cut diagonally towards goal, a bit of variety, etc. I know he normally plays off the right, which we haven't seen, so that would be good to see when he does that. And then I think uh, Brendan Rodgers was really looking to put out the most experienced team he could at Ibrox. Experience doesn't necessarily mean the oldest team; it just means the team that had the most experience of playing in these kind of matches, which is why probably Abada came back in, and rightly so. And Yang, he got a brief cameo in that game, but looked a bit nervous, if I'm honest, which you can kind of understand in that situation. So yeah, listen, a few little flashes of promise, like you say, but a long way to go in terms of having a data set that we can analyze with any authority.
Yeah, I remember one of your articles saying come back to him when he's played 900 minutes before getting excited about a player like Yang. Definitely lots of promise, and I can see why Celtic forked out the roughly about £2 million to secure his services. There's definitely something there. I think having that dynamic between, I know he can play on the left side and the right hand side. He's quite versatile in that. But even having on the left hand side, if he is fancied there, playing him and Palmer, having the two of them interchanging in the team, and then on the right hand side, him and Abada. But the thing is, Tillio's still to come in the team as well. There's a bit of fluidity when it comes to this forward line. There's going to be players coming in and out. Even where Bernardo's going to play as that attacking midfielder, is he going to play further forward? Is it going to be Matt O'Reilly that goes a bit more deeper, like he did against Rangers, to really really good effect? May I add. Or will it be Turnbull in that attacking midfield? And all of a sudden, it seems like when the injuries start to clear up and once players become more acclimatised to Rodgers' team, the squad will be stacked. I don't know about you, but I feel like the squad will be stacked in terms of positions. Maybe there'll be players of similar quality fighting it out, but it's good to have different options for different areas. And yeah, I think in a couple of months' time, especially when all the centre halves come back, you'll see an overflow of defenders. Celtic will have too many all of a sudden when it feels as if they don't have many just now. But competition is always good at Celtic, isn't it?
Yeah, I think coming back to where's the state of the squad in terms of as the transfer window finished, I'm still a little bit grumpy about. I think we've done half a good job, right? So
Mm-hmm.
I think the sort of acquisition of younger players who, let's be honest, most of us don't know a lot about. They're all within the sort of 1 to 4 million sort of bracket, tend to be in the sort of 20 to 23 type age range. I think we know that that's a sort of strategic element of Celtic's recruitment, where especially Mark Ulbrich as the sort of head of recruitment is contacts and so forth in less well known markets, let's say, and so South Korea, Australia, etc. Um, even the Greek league, to some extent, Sweden, some of the leagues below the sort of top five tier leagues, top one tier leagues, etc. That's all good. I think that all makes sense. Happy with that. Happy to see that we've got a bunch of young players that we're hoping to grow and develop, and that's really again Rodgers' strength is as a coach, as opposed to being a manager of a football club. His thing is really he coaches players. That's his major skill set. So that's all good. What I was expecting and hoping for was that in addition to that, and alongside that absolutely right approach and right strategy, is that we would bring in 3 to 4 players who you would be comfortable pitching straight into a Champions League game. Not necessarily saying it has to be this age or that age, and I'm not saying they have to cost this much or that much, but just the caliber of player that enhances and takes forward the overall quality of the team. Because two things: one, it was evident last season that with Ange Postecoglou playing an incredibly efficient, coherent style of football, we were struggling at Champions League level. That was obvious. We did our best. We were perhaps a little bit unlucky not to beat Shakhtar, but essentially, Leipzig and Madrid were way ahead of us in that regard. And second is that Celtic are one of the best in the best financial state of many clubs in Europe, I would suggest, given sort of cash reserves, given and given our situation relative to clubs in Scotland, where we're in an incredibly strong position, and therefore, I think we all felt there was probably the capacity there, the leeway, if you like, to really strengthen the squad to kind of close that gap a little bit and really start to sort of be a very strong challenger, at least to finish third in that Champions League group, and even maybe push the second pot team a little bit closer than what we managed last season. And that would all be within the financial parameters in which we operate, and largely that didn't happen. I think the only position that I feel that we've really done a really good job on is ironically centre half, where everybody's injured, and we're arguably pitching our fifth and sixth centre halves into the hardest, the key game of the season last weekend. But that's just bad luck. You can't. Sometimes that just happens. But I think overall, I'm really pleased with the way that we strengthened that particular position. But I would have been looking for a starting player who would be capable and comfortable of playing Champions League level. I know that's a big ask, and I know that it's not easier said than done. But at goalkeeper, at left back, a box to box midfielder, and probably one more winger. So I feel that we've like you say, we're kind of stacked as far as potential. And even Rogers said about Bernardo, he's a young player with potential. A young player with potential doesn't mean we're going to go toe to toe with Lazio. Doesn't mean we're going to go toe to toe with Feyenoord, right? So I don't feel frankly, we're any further forward. In fact, we may even regressed, given we've lost Starfelt and Jota as regards Champions League level competitiveness. But I'm happy that we've been true to ourselves in terms of getting more of that younger group of players and bolstering that sort of that kind of cadre of players. That I think that aspect of it is fine. But for me, there's mixed feelings really.
Yeah, and I think it shows a bit of consistency as well, which is quite good. I mean, I'll try and take a sort of positive slant to it and say that Celtic for they were a bit lost when it came to their ideology or their philosophies with regard to bringing in players. It seems as if they're sticking to the one model now and they're going with it regardless. Even when you hear Brendan Rodgers talking about the model, the transfer model, it's pretty much indoctrinated into him to talk about the model and how he's happy with Mark Lawwell's sort of model. I know that can rub people the wrong way, but I think Celtic have got to keep themselves right as well. Just the league that they play in. You talk about the cash reserves that they have. Celtic are in a really good place financially, despite the league that they play in. They won't get that much money for winning the league. So they need to make their money through other means, and that's through selling players on by developing them and then selling them on. It is a wee bit annoying when you see players that were quite, well, not heavily rumoured, but you seen their names float about for a couple of weeks and months, and then they didn't make the move to Celtic. You see guys such as Fabian Reeder, who went to Rennes in the last days of the window. I think he went for just over 10 million in pounds. So I think that shows you that Celtic probably could have afforded that. It's whether they would pay that money without loaning him first. I think the only time that Celtic have really paid that money, apart from Julian recently, is when they've loaned players firsthand. They've seen what they're like, they've seen how they acclimatise to the group, and then they elect to either sign them or not. It's that try before you buy method. But at the same time, Alan, I guess it is quite frustrating to see these players, these young players who could revolutionise a Celtic midfield that really could change the team, go to a team like Rennes. I know Rennes, they've got a track history of developing players, maybe through their own with players like Camavinga. I remember him playing against Celtic as a 16-year-old, but they play in League One, better league, top 5 league. I know people like to slag that league, but it is one of the better leagues in the world. So yeah, it's disappointing. But what would you say with regard to the whole Reader situation? Was that pie in the sky stuff, or Celtic never going to pay that amount of money?
Yeah. So listen, I mean, the other aspect of this, again, to be fair to the club, is that we don't know to what extent Celtic were genuinely interested. Is one thing. The second is, did the player want to come to Celtic? That's a huge part of it. And actually, the better quality of player that you go after, probably the less likely it is that they will want to come to Scotland, mainly because they'll probably have other offers or other opportunities, really. So that all that has to be put into consideration as well. So I don't know is the answer. I don't as I say, it was somebody that was talked about. At any one time, Celtic will have a large scouting list of players, and just because someone's on that list doesn't mean to say there's serious interest or that they're going to be anywhere close to signing for the club. And, and in fact, depending on the player situation, based on the realities of life nowadays, with agents, lawyers, parents, God knows who involved in the sort of food chain, if you like, of a player's kind of entourage, and the same sort of with the clubs, is that a name hits the papers for many reasons, not necessarily because there's a genuine interest. Someone's making a play, someone's making a point, someone's trying to drum up interest. All that comes into it. So for sure, I mean, I think what frustrates me is that if I come back to especially the left back and the goalkeeping situation, um, it looked to me as if the interest and the package necessary to put together something that would bring Kieran Tierney back to the club was absolutely genuine, and it was something that the club felt they could do. And when that didn't happen, there didn't seem to be any plan B. It was like almost that was it. Or we're just not going to get a left back then. And similarly, there seemed to be strong interest in Livakovic, although given that he went for something like €6 million in the end, it was actually quite a low fee. I suspect that for whatever reason, Celtic decided that either they decided they weren't interested, or they were told there was no way the player's coming to Scotland. Whatever. But again, what was the plan B? Who was then next on the list, as it were? So I think those two positions are the most disappointing. If it's a big if, but if Bernardo is another sort of Jota level of player from the Benfica academy, and there's some indication that he's a good talent, then that, as you say, that try before you buy model, which is eminently sensible for Celtic. I think we are very cautious. I don't think we should overly criticise that, but again, I come back to you know what are we trying to do? To me, I look at the Champions League and I look at Europa League, and I think, right, what are the teams in those competitions who are similar to Celtic in the sense of they're not getting 150 million a year from broadcasting? What are their trading models? How are they operating? And can Celtic get closer to that? And I still feel we're at the foothills of our player trading capabilities. If you compare us to even smaller clubs in Europe, like Utrecht and Midtjylland and AZ Alkmaar and so forth, we're actually still kind of playing around at the edges almost, and we're not committed to. And what do I mean by that? I mean, you've got to be actually a bit more aggressive to start with, and this is tough for us to take. You've actually got to be a bit more aggressive in selling players. So, for example, if a Hatate or an O'Reilly, for example, as well as Jota, had been sold this window, I'm sure we'd all have been disappointed. But if that brought in another 15, 20 million pounds, you then go and get your two or three players that take you to that next up to that next level, and you do that year on year on year, and incrementally you're getting better and you're getting stronger. And that's very easy to say. I know that it's very easy to say, but at the moment we're still sort of fiddling around, being quite cautious, sticking to the principle of getting these younger players in for not too much money, and that has to be one pillar of the strategy, but it can't be one size fits all. Sometimes you just need to go and get a player because he's available and he solves a problem for you, even if he's like 30 years old. You know, Joe Hart was such a signing. When Rodgers first came in, he brought Kolo Touré in, and Kolo Touré actually, although he declined very quickly in his 6 months, 8 months at Celtic when he was playing, he actually guided the team through the Champions League qualifiers, because we had as always in those days, we had a very inexperienced patchwork defence. So sometimes, well, I guess my point is there isn't one size fits all. Your player trading model has to have many attributes to it, many facets to it that you use in different circumstances. It's not all about just about buying 20-year-olds for 1.5 million. That's one part of it, and we do that very well. there's other parts of it too, and these are the bits that I think are still immature. And it's about, as I say, it's about increasing volume, the number of trades that you do, and the value of those trades. Because Celtic, I would have thought, have got a reasonable reputation in the transfer market, in that when players leave Celtic, they generally do okay. So clubs can trust that if they buy Celtic players, they've probably had a bit of Champions League experience. They've got experience of winning things, which is quite a big factor as well. And the club generally has identified quite good young players in the past sort of 10 years. So again, there's a lot of strengths that Celtic and I've got there, a lot of, but we just feel like we're just constrained, which is something is just holding us back at the moment, and I don't know what it is.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a lack of knowledge in that market, or it's apprehension to sell players, or sell players at wholesale rates, or at wholesale volume, or numbers. Celtic did lose a lot of key players this summer. When you look at it, when you look at Jota, Starfelt, they're two big names. They were two names that were first on the team sheet every single week. Don't know if there's maybe that fear factor with the hierarchy, that they don't want to lose the spine, or sections of the spine of the team before every season, and then they have to redo that. Maybe that's just due to a lack of confidence that they can make up those numbers every season. You see teams maybe do it elsewhere in the league, the teams that don't have the resources that Celtic have. Motherwell have to create a new team every season due to the fact that a lot of their players are on 1 year deals. It's the same for different teams in Scotland, with just the way the contract situations. With Celtic, they can do it at a higher with higher money or higher finances, just due to the fact that they're in the Champions League, that they win things, they win domestic competitions, and they get good fees for players, because the players are naturally of a higher quality that Celtic bring in the first place. It is interesting, and we'll see how things go over the next couple of years. But I remember Ange Postecoglou's comments after the AGM, and he was probably talking about himself as well with regard to the model. He says Celtic have to be more aggressive in their model. Don't get too
Exactly.
attached to your heroes, because this is the way that football clubs work. You have them for 1 or 2 or 3 seasons. 3 seasons is probably the max for players, and then you let them go for a healthy profit. He was saying it. I don't know if he was sort of foreshadowing his own exit, because he could certainly be put in that basket as well. But
He was right.
that
He was absolutely right.
he's
He was
completely
absolutely
right.
right. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. He was absolutely, spot on when he said that. And Motherwell, and I admire clubs, Motherwell, Ross County, that lose 10 players and then they get another 10 players in, and then they're there, well clear of relegation, fighting for a top 6 place. I think it's admirable. But listen, remember two things. One is Celtic have hired an elite level coach,
Mhm.
right? So that's if you like, think of that as your mitigation. All right, so you're going to lose 5 or 6 starters every summer because we've got this transfer model that the only way we can grow the club more quickly, because TV money isn't going to go up, etc., and Champions League money is a gamble, is player through player trading. Therefore, every summer you're going to get 5 or 6 new starters, right? But you're an elite coach; it's your job to get them operational. But second of all, is let's be honest about it. The quality of the Scottish Premier League is poor, and if Celtic can't put out a competent team, still win matches, even if assimilating a lot of new players, then there's something wrong. You know what I mean? There's something badly wrong. Um, on the flip side to that, of course, is that we as the fans go. There's a bad reaction if you draw at home to St Johnstone, right? So there's probably a little bit of education amongst ourselves and our own expectations that the only way to move forward is to increase the volume, increase the value of player trading. That's inevitably going to be disruptive. It does mean you're losing players quicker, you're bringing in more new players, and therefore there might be the odd, bump in the road as far as losing at home to Motherwell or drawing at home to St Johnstone or whatever. And that's just the cost that what you pay for trying to grow the football club.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything that you've said there. Celtic need to basically just get used to this model. I think it is very difficult when you've got that rivalry with Rangers, that it is expectant that Celtic win the league every season, and maybe losing a couple of players can be a bit, I don't know, it can be a bit risky in terms of, will the players that come in make a difference, or will they make the same difference as the same difference as the ones that have left? But that the model should work, and it should allow that to happen quite seamlessly. But fingers crossed that they keep going with this model, because so far it seems to be working. And the players that have been brought in recently, I think some of them are really starting to show it. Yang, that performance against St Johnstone, and the cameo against Rangers as well, for a couple of nice touches in the game. He shows no fear. I think that's one thing in his game that's really stood out. He shows no fear when he's dribbling. He might not. It might not always come off for him, but he'll keep on going for it, and he'll never let that deter him from trying it again. I think that attitude and that mentality will see him go quite far in this team, especially if he can work on some of the things that are maybe bringing him down. But I was going to bring us into the main topic of discussion today in today's podcast, which was basically just a quick overview of the season so far, with the players that have did well, maybe the ones that haven't done so well, and the manager's performance as well. So 5 games have been played professionally this season, 3 wins, a draw, and a loss. The loss being to Kilmarnock in the League Cup. The League Cup at Rugby Park, the draw being at home to St Johnstone. I think the highlight of those results, certainly, I mean, you could talk about the Pittodrie result being a good result, considering, I think they've improved. I know the results haven't exactly shown that, but they have improved their squad. But the highlight of that must be the result against Rangers. I think we were talking at the beginning of this podcast. It definitely still seems as if the Celtic support and everybody involved with Celtic are still on a high after Sunday, just due to the way that Celtic were, or the way that Celtic were lining up coming into the match. The squad was decimated in the defence with injuries. You're talking about 5th and 6th choice centre backs in the team, and they still come and managed to get a win. I think it'll be a famous win in years to come, because you look at all the odds were stacked against Celtic a lot. Celtic Rangers had a near full strength team. They had all their new players in and around the team, and they were ready to go. Celtic had their injuries, and yet Celtic were the away side, no fans at the ground, and yet they came away with a 1-0 win. Very, very impressive. And I think these are the results. I think this result has definitely got that feel-good factor between Brendan Rodgers and the supporters. I know that there weren't any fans there to show that visual support between the two, but I think that Brendan Rodgers got himself a bit more goodwill with the fans after that result. Would you agree, Alan?
Yeah, listen, I mean, the most important aspect of it for me is that kind of macro level context of, a Celtic team absolutely kind of, really not firing at all coherently yet this season. Defensively, you've got your arguably your best defender out completely. Your second best defender is probably 70-80% fit at best. You've got, like you say, probably let's say your 4th and 6th choice centre backs, and Greg Taylor's been, let's be honest, struggling for form this season.
Yeah.
And Joe Hart's, he's he's visibly getting older before our eyes. I'm not being unkind. It's just a fact of life that players
Catches up
regress as
with
they get
all of
older in
us.
terms of they're absolutely, I can speak to that, right, in terms of their agility and speed, especially. So that wasn't a great kind of picture going forward. We still are bang on about the midfield. I don't think anybody believes, and rightly so, that a midfield 3 of Turnbull, O'Reilly, and McGregor is a kind of, never mind Champions League level. I mean, it's good enough for the SPFL for sure, but at European stage, at whatever level of European competition, that's going to be a midfield that potentially gets overrun. And then, we knew that, probably the wingers, neither Maeda or Abada especially, had really shown great form thus far. So yeah, that was the kind of. And now listen again. I don't want to keep being that guy this week. I sound like I'm being really negative, and I'm not meaning to be. It's just I want the best for the club. It is slightly ludicrous to me that Celtic, given all the financial advantages that we have, given the how far we're ahead of every club in the league financially, and given where we finished last season with such a coherent, cohesive team playing very consistent football, that 6 games in or 5 games in or whatever it is, we should go there in such a, almost not disarray, but in such a a weak state. I mean, I find that I can't get my head around that, but that
No.
that is the world that we find ourselves in. I can't change that. So, having said all that, right, the context of the game was this was an absolute must win for them. Absolute must win. They were never going to play Celtic at a weaker moment. They'd already slipped a point or two behind us in the league. They're coming off the back of an absolute hammering in Europe, and they've spent all this money on all these attacking players, none of whom they don't seem to know how to arrange them and how to kind of come up with a formation that gets the best out of those players. So there's an enormous amount of pressure on Mickey Beale, an enormous amount of pressure on them, and they had to win, and they didn't. So in that context, and the fact that we came away from there with 3 points, I think it's absolutely brilliant, and it's actually, it's caused a huge amount of self-reflection on the other side of the city, which is, as we know, is quite a rare a rare thing. So that's all good. See what happens from that. But yeah, listen, one of the things that have been on the huddle breakdown that we try and think about when we're looking at games is what I rather grandly call attribution, which sounds a bit, but what I really mean is, why did what happened happen? How do you what do you put it down to? So in the context of this game, you're really looking at it almost as if I sort of simply boil it down. Was it because Celtic were brilliant defensively, or were they just really bad attacking wise? Or why did the result end up to be the way it was, kind of thing? And I think if we're being honest with ourselves, we have to acknowledge that the way they were set up and the way that they started the game was, I would say, incompetent. I mean, literally. If you wanted to trouble that Celtic team, you wouldn't have played that way, right? And if you wanted to get 50,000 people with no away fans right on top of you support, get them going, get them G'd up, you wouldn't sit back. You wouldn't not press. You wouldn't try and press aggressively the right back that's not fit, the unathletic left back, the two centre backs that have never played in a game like that, the goalkeeper that's starting to struggle to play out quickly from the back. You would press, 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 press. You'd get as much speed into the team as you could. You wouldn't play two sitting midfielders. You wouldn't play the slowest forward you've got in the centre, right? And you wouldn't let Callum McGregor do whatever the hell he wants. So that was utterly incompetent from them. And what it did was it allowed and I noted this down on my notes. It was from the 18th minute onwards that their crowd started to get on top of their own players,
Yeah, I
and
heard
they'd
that as
pretty much
well.
lost. They'd almost lost the crowd at that point.
Hmm.
And from being in a position where they could put the Celtic team under enormous pressure, and we don't know if that young and kind of out of form defence would have crumbled. We don't know. Um, but what actually happened is they just put an enormous amount of pressure on their own players by being so passive and so incoherent about the way they were trying to break Celtic down, which is, I mean, there was some sense to it, right? Celtic play a reasonably high line, and certainly a very high line by SPFL standards. And you're probably thinking, well, if I can get the ball between Hart, who's not as quick coming off his line as he used to be, and these young central defenders, and get them turning, and that's what they were doing. They're just launching high balls into that area behind the centre backs. And let's be honest, there were a few hairy moments. There were a few hairy moments uh, because of that. But again, you wouldn't pick Dessers as your centre forward if you're going to play that way. You'd pick your quickest forward. So anyway, that was, I think in the first half especially, I think Celtic just played the way they normally play. I don't think they did anything. Where I think Rodgers deserves some credit is probably the second half, where he would have known that there was no way they were going to keep playing like they were playing. And obviously Celtic defence did drop back. But I think players like Turnbull, O'Reilly, Home when he came on especially, did a great job of actually shutting down channels, because Celtic were actually quite brave in that second half, and that the three midfielders put in a power of work. Home and O'Reilly, especially the number of turnovers they generated, was astonishing, and that we defended really mainly with the sort of seven players. Because if you look at the sort of heat maps and the kind of average pass network positions and all that sort of thing, we kept the three forwards high, and it was a bit like the famous Edouard game when we won 3-2 with 10 men, and then they stopped having away fans after that because they got fed up with us celebrating, was that he even though he gone down to 10 men, Rodgers was positive, and in that second half he was positive. He kept the three forwards really high, and Maeda was an absolute star because he basically nullified Tavernier. Tavernier's by miles their most creative player,
Yeah.
and he basically stopped him getting over the halfway line. So Rodgers does due some credit for that for sure. But I mean, it was basically like an elite coach up against a PE teacher on the touchline. So you got to take that into consideration.
That's your words, not mine, Alan. But yeah, I think there was a definite what do you call that, gap in quality between the two. Brendan
By the
Rodgers
way,
just knows.
Ryan, I'm sorry. By the way, there's nothing I have not said about their performance that I've not heard from their own podcasts and their own commentators.
That's fair enough. You're just I won't shoot the messenger. I'll. It's just I think Brendan Rodgers deserves a lot of credit, just due to the way that he set his team out. Yeah, you were saying in the second half, Maeda. So that thankless task that he does, he might be. He's very half and half with regard to some of his attacking play might come off, some of it might not. But when he's asking, when a manager, whether it be Postecoglou, whether it be Brendan Rodgers, if he's asked to defend and do that job, do that thankless task, he will do it. Like his life depends on it. He's yeah, an absolutely incredible second half performance. Probably the first half as well, but second half in terms of shutting down Tavernier. Tavernier is their main threat. The only threat he could bring about was on set pieces, which is when
That's right.
Maeda wasn't allowed anywhere near him, because that's the
Yes,
rules
that's
of the
right. That's
game.
right. Yeah.
The only time he wasn't allowed
Yeah.
near him was because of the rules. But yeah, all in all, a good performance.
Yeah, well, it was a good performance. Again. Listen, I try and look at all of it, right? There were certainly some noteworthy defensive performances. I've mentioned Maeda. I think obviously, as I said, O'Reilly and Home, even Turnbull. Turnbull, I know he didn't get a lot of ball, but in that first half especially, he forced Jack and Raskin back. They were going backwards, backwards, backwards. They always went backwards, and that was partly due to the good work of Turnbull and O'Reilly. A lot of it, that kind of stuff, goes a bit unnoticed, but they really did block off the passing channels quite well. Home, when he came on and replaced Turnbull in the second half, he was excellent off the ball, and he was quite tidy on the ball too. We have to mention Liam Scales, of course. The performance of a career probably for him in the second half in terms of the art of defending your area. He in terms of putting your body on the line, getting your body in front of players, getting a leg in, a chest in, a head in, anything in to stop the ball getting near the goal. He was excellent in that regard, and he kept his composure because he had a really bad start. I mean, he lost his first two headers. The second one, the ball was in the back of the net, but actually because he had left his position, Dessers ended up being offside because Scales should have been marking him and he left him. They ended up being offside, so that all worked out okay in the end. And after that, he was pretty steady. And in the second half, he really got to shine because, again, he was probably asked to do the job that he's more comfortable doing, which is a traditional old school centre half defending his 18-yard box, and that's exactly what he did. I mean, the stat that I keep drilling out is that in the second half he completed 5 passes, but 15 defensive actions. So that was playing a game that Liam Scales is comfortable playing. Ask him
Yeah.
to play 100 passes and 5 defensive actions, is less comfortable. I don't want to labour that point because I don't want to take away from what was a tremendous performance from the lad, and one that I'm sure he'll always look back on. So that was a real high spot. I think I've mentioned the goalkeeping position a lot. Only fair to say that I think Joe Hart was good. In fact, he came out and saved a couple of dodgy-looking situations off his line, which is great to see. So, yeah, he deserves credit as well. So, yeah, listen, a lot of good individual performances. I also have, for balance, to point out that I don't recall us ever giving the ball away in our own defensive third as many times as we did in that second half. Our passing was really poor in the second half. And we were under a lot of pressure. Players were tiring. Johnson probably should have gone off 10 minutes before he did. He was really struggling. Taylor got a knock, and we had to bring on Bernabei, who's, let's be kind, is not the most defensively disciplined. Um, Lagerbielke was struggling throughout most of the game. To be fair to the lad, I think he kept going. Fair play to him, but he had quite a few nasty sort of moments. So,
Mhm.
there was a lot of things to kind of paper over there, and we made a lot of mistakes. But actually, we got away with most of them. Because was that because their forwards aren't very good? Did we just get lucky? There's probably a little bit of both. Certainly, it looks like at this stage the forward players that they've brought in are just quite a downgrade on the likes of Kent and Morelos, for example. So that I think that's definitely a factor. And as I say, to have at the end of all that, your best striker is probably Roof. So what do? Well, you stick him out wide in the first half, and then you get him marking Callum McGregor in the second half. And you sort of think, what are you doing? What are you doing? That was just you can't, that's not down to Rodgers. That's just poor management on the other side there. So, yeah, listen, for me, it was all about the result. It really was because, as I said, of all the context I said before, in terms of where we are in the season, how it set Celtic up the season, this is an enormous psychological blow for them. You can see that largely the support have lost faith now in the manager, and largely the narrative now is that they can't see what value a lot of the new signings are bringing, apart from Butland, who's a good goalkeeper. So psychologically, this is an enormous, blow really for them, and a positive for Celtic. And irrespective of the result, that's the bit that probably is going to be most important when we look back over the season.
Yeah, absolutely. And for a season that has been mixed to begin with for Celtic, in the 5 games they've failed to win in 2 games out of their 5. For Celtic, that's in a lot of seasons that's just not good enough. But somehow they find themselves 4 points clear due to results in other games and that big result against Rangers. So despite not playing well or not playing the free-flowing football that maybe people would come to expect from Brendan Rodgers, especially in his first season, maybe 2016, 2017, when the football was at its best, I would say. All of a sudden, Brendan Rodgers and his Celtic side have got breathing space now. They've got breathing space because they know that even if they were to lose a game, they would still be on top just due to the way the league table is. I think and this is just a prediction, after this international break, you'll start to see the real Celtic under Brendan Rodgers, because I think they'll play with a freedom due to the fact that result will galvanise absolutely everybody in that squad. I think there'll be players that will be desperate to come into this team. There'll be players coming back from injury. It seems Hatate will be coming back after the international break. You're hoping that if he is ready to come back into the team, that he can just slot in the middle, or even slot further forward and play Matt O'Reilly in that double pivot, because it seems that's something I actually want to talk to you about, Alan. The double
Mm.
pivot, it seemed as if on Sunday that Matt O'Reilly was playing with Callum McGregor in the double pivot. He was playing a lot deeper, and it did seem that was a better fit than David Turnbull and Callum McGregor playing in the double pivot. What's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think again, listen, it's kind of horses for courses, and it's a little bit obviously contextual in terms of that particular game. I don't think unlike the Rangers, I think they did set up to have Raskin and Jack sat right in front of the centre halves, and they didn't really move from there. I would say that's for sure. That's like a classic sort of double pivot, really. I don't think Celtic set up like that. I think in the first half, especially when they were just sat off us, McGregor could play his normal kind of deeper position and really dictate the play. And O'Reilly and Turnbull were kind of pushed on is when they could. But what I think what I'm trying to say is with O'Reilly is what was really impressive about his performance is that he he wasn't a classic double pivot. He wasn't sat beside McGregor, but he was when he needed to be. So he
Mm-hmm.
was making decisions about where he needed to be based on how the game was going. So if he could find space further forward, he went forward. If he had to drop back, he went back. And actually, his average position was deeper than McGregor's over the course of the
Wow.
90 minutes, which is slightly remarkable, really. But I thought it was a very intelligent performance in terms of him really getting forward when he could, but dropping back when he could. And I suppose I'd rather see it in that sense, rather than saying, right, you're going to play as a double two. That means you sit there and you don't move. More this idea that you've got players who are intelligent enough to say, well, I need you to protect the defence when it needs protecting, but I need you to get forward when you can. And then that becomes a decision making from that player. And Matt O'Reilly's one of those players that's, clearly a very intelligent player, and therefore can probably, make decisions about where he needs to be based on the context of the game. So I think that was a bit that pleased me about his performance more than anything. I don't think we set out to play a double pivot as such. And as I say, in the second half, it was more that the criteria was, can we keep three players high? Can we keep the threat of the counter attack constantly on their minds? And can we make sure we don't let Tavernier cross the halfway line? And that meant that the three midfielders had to drop at that point. And whatever you want to call that formation, their job was to screen the defence but keep the forward players as high as we possibly could. And that was a tricky balancing act. Again, I thought it was a brave thing that Rodgers did there, but it nearly paid off. If we'd been more clinical, we'd probably scored 2 goals on the counter attack. In fact, I guarantee if we'd been playing a Leipzig or something, or even a Salzburg, they would have scored a couple of goals on the break in the second half, in that type of setup. So, yeah, definitely. I think we'll see little subtleties like that. I mean, against, for example, St Johnstone, if you look at where the player's positioning was, it was classic Postecoglou. We ended up for most of the game in a 2-3-5, where the two central midfielders tried to get between the centre halves. The fullbacks and McGregor formed a sort of a mid block kind of screen, with it coming in a little bit, and the two centre halves behind them. That's pretty much how we set up with the ball. I'm talking about with the ball under Postecoglou. It was classic. So I think what we'll see with Rodgers, as I said before, is more variety, more flexibility, if you like, around how the team sets up. I don't think it will always be 4-2-3-1, or it will always be whatever. I think we'll see more, you know, finding weaknesses in that particular position. I think that to me is the thing that I believe he will get the benefit of, his experience at Leicester. Because when he was at Liverpool, it was a bit like being at Celtic in that they were kind of expected to win every game, or they were certainly expected to be on the front foot every game. I mean, even if Liverpool go to Arsenal or Man United or what have you, they're expected to put up a good performance, expected to try and score goals and try and win the game. But when he was at Leicester, and suddenly he was playing all these teams like the top 6 teams, and he didn't have there wasn't the expectation that you're going to go to even Tottenham or Arsenal or Chelsea or what have you, and win. And they all play different styles. I think he's learned a lot from that, and this is what I picked up from the lad from Leicester that we had on the huddle breakdown. There was quite a lot of tactical variety in how Rodgers set up his teams, and I think we'll see the benefit of that. And then actually, that's the thing that gives me hope about Europe a little bit. I don't think we're strong enough, honestly. But whereas with Postecoglou, we knew we were going to play in a certain way, and we played in that way. Come hell or high water, that's how we were going to play. And we kind of nearly broke through on a couple of occasions. I think what we'll see under Rodgers is we'll see a much more flexible approach to try and maximise our strengths and take advantage of whatever weaknesses we can find in the opposition. And I think we saw that in subtle ways at Ibrox on Sunday. So that to me, that's probably the most exciting part of the season. I think is to see how we adapt as a team and become more sort of flexible in our approach.
Yeah, it's definitely been an interesting start to the season, but I think the result against Rangers on Sunday really did reinvigorate a lot of the support, I would say, as well. Because the past couple of weeks before, or the two or so weeks before, there was a bit of a dismal feeling especially online. I know online isn't the real world. I know that for certain, but there was a lot of negative comments going about. But I think I know not all of the business that was required was done in the transfer window, but they did get those players through the door. They got Phillips through, they get Palma, and then they get Bernardo as well. That then coupled with the result on Sunday, it seems as if there was a sea of optimism coming, and it came at its highest point on Sunday against Rangers. So Yeah, I think this international break would have been a lot longer if Celtic had dropped points or got beat on Sunday. Well, maybe not dropped points, because a lot of people would have taken a draw before the game was played, but a defeat would have really set the supporters back. I think there would have been quite a bit of unrest. So I'm glad that the win was secured, and it seems as if, at least in terms of the optics with regard to the table, the club seem to be in a pretty good place, and the only way is up with regard to the league, and then we've got the European adventure to look forward to. I know it could be a fingers in the eyes sort of scenario with watching Celtic in Europe, as it usually is. But when that group came out, Alan, I just want to talk about the Champions League group. When that group came out and you seen that it was Feyenoord, Lazio, and Atletico Madrid, I don't know about you, but I felt this isn't talking against the group or talking the group down, but it's got the look of more of a Europa League group was over the past couple of years, and I think that's just the way the dynamics of football. Not Atletico Madrid, because I know they got into the final, but they got into the final, a couple of finals, one in 2014, but maybe playing against Lazio over the past few years in that competition. I don't know, maybe just the names, but it's definitely a group that Celtic could get points from. The teams are going to take points off each other, and who knows? If the points fall the right way, then Celtic could get second or third in that group. You never know. I'm actually just thinking about that Europa League comment, and then I'm looking at their histories and that, and I'm like, do I even mean that? But you know what I mean with regard to some of the names. Some of them have been playing in those competitions, but it still is an exciting group all the same, and one that Celtic can do moderately successful. And you reckon?
So, I mean, listen. Yeah, the good news is we avoided one of the kind of super clubs like last year we had Real Madrid. I mean, Real Madrid are one of the best teams in the world, and it's so far ahead of Celtic in terms of the talent in their squad. It's just ridiculous. So we haven't got a Real Madrid for sure, and we got the lowest kind of seeded pot one team, I think, final, which is fortunate. So that's good. Atletico Madrid clearly will be a very, very tough task. I mean, they're the sort of team that you just know they're just not going to let you win. No matter what happens, we might not get hammered like we did in Madrid in Real Madrid, but they'll find a way to beat us because they're just a clever team that can find a way. The other two, yeah, we've got a fight, a fighter's chance, as they say. Um, but again, I don't know a lot about those teams. I'll do more digging about them as and when we get closer to those fixtures. All I can really comment on is our own capabilities. And as I said, as I look at it, my view is that as a squad, we've got a weaker squad now than we have had last year in the Champions League. And last year in the Champions League, we struggled. Other than against a depleted and obviously Shakhtar Donetsk, obviously Ukrainian team, all of that, all of the awful things that are happening around that team and their families and the friends and so forth, having to play in Poland. We were just bringing it back to football. We were unlucky not to win both of those games, but really that was I would call that a distressed opponent, really, and that was probably is just again putting all the humanity to one side. It was probably the luckiest kind of draw that we could have got in that sense, and we managed to get 2 points out of that. But Leipzig were a class apart. Madrid were several classes apart. And I don't see either any of those three teams being any worse, particularly than Leipzig were, really. So
Mm-hmm.
although we don't have a Real Madrid, I think we've got three very strong teams. It's almost like we've got three pot two teams, if that makes sense. Yeah. So
I get you.
you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
totally
So
get you.
yeah. We haven't got
Maybe
a pot
maybe
one
that's
team,
what
we've
I,
got three.
maybe that's what I mean with regard to
Yeah.
that. Maybe that is a better sort of wording of the group, instead of having a pot one team. That Champions League. When you think of Champions League, you think of the latter stages teams, especially after Christmas. You see your Man Cities, your Liverpools. I know Liverpool are in Europa League this season, but Real Madrid, etc., etc. The fact is that I'm not saying that these teams are a level below, but maybe that's where they're stationed, and they are sort of what you would describe as pot 2 teams, and their results at Celtic can get results against these teams. They just need to be streetwise in Europe. You're just hoping that
Yeah.
that's
I mean,
that's what Brendan Rodgers is here for.
the nearest benchmark that we've had with this group of players would be, the Leipzig games last year. And if you think back to those, I mean, Leipzig were almost the worst team that Celtic could play from a stylistic matchup.
Yeah,
In
absolutely.
boxing about styles make fights, right? So for Celtic to play a hyper-aggressive pressing team with the weaknesses that we had and still have, frankly. I don't want to get back onto that again, but we still have, especially at the left side of the field, playing a hyper-aggressive pressing team full of young, athletic midfielders, which is what they had, Szoboszlai and Kunku and all that, right, running at you, Silva and all those players.
Schlager as well that played for them, or
Yeah,
Konrad
yeah, yeah,
Laimer.
yeah.
Konrad Laimer as well.
Like Limer's a very fine player, and Werner is very quick, obviously, the striker. So having all that, right, that's almost the worst team that Celtic could have played, because that really exploits Celtic's weaknesses badly. And but having said that, in the home game, we actually matched them pretty well until about the 70th minute, when Celtic's own pressing model under Postecoglou, didn't scale to that level, because we couldn't press that aggressively without the ball for 70 minutes, and so the legs went, and I think they scored a couple of late goals, but in all other respects we matched them. So I don't think we'll be playing that same quite open, high pressing style under Rodgers. I think we'll be a bit more compact, and I think therefore will make it more difficult for these teams. The challenge will be, obviously, therefore, can we? Because what we did do well last season is we did actually create quite a lot of chances. Even against Madrid, we created some chances. So, and that's the trade-off, right? Postecoglou's gamble was that we'd create enough chances that if we could nick a goal, get 2 goals up even, suddenly that just changes the whole dynamic of the game. They get stressed, etc., etc. And didn't work out that way, but that was the idea. Under Rodgers, I think we'll be a wee bit more circumspect, a wee bit more compact, I think. So, home games, we've always got a chance, right? We've always got a chance, even against these kind of, let's call them pot 2 teams. So, um, I'm not optimistic, I'll be honest, because, as I say, I'm just trying to be as realistic as I can. I don't think we've got a stronger squad. Therefore, why would we do better than we did last season? I suppose is the way I look at it, because we've not been as lucky in the draw. I think we've got three very, very strong sides that we're playing against. So listen, it's all learning, it's all experience, etc. And I think if we can get a third place somehow, which that is possible. A bit of luck, you could finish in third. We get something to play for after Christmas. I'd be absolutely delighted. Snap your hand off now if that was possible.
Yeah, I would. I think the majority of Celtic fans would take that if it was on offer right now. We'll see how that group goes. It's definitely going to be very, very interesting. As I said before, teams will take points off each other through the duration of the group,
True,
and it'll be
very
interesting
true,
to see.
true.
It'll be interesting to see where the squads where the teams line up after maybe half of the fixtures are played. I'm interested to see the landscape of the group at the halfway point, to see if there's any team that's went out in front, or it's all very close and Celtic can still have an impact and taking one of those European spots. All they have to do is not finish last, and they'll be guaranteed
Yes,
Europe after Christmas.
yeah.
It could a Club Brugge happen and they finish first. I'm not so sure. I think that's pie in the sky stuff. But stranger things have
Well, you make
happened
a
out
great
there.
point. You make a great point. All the teams could take points off each other, and it could become like a coin, a coin
It's what
coin
happened in the
toss
Europa League
almost.
group in
So yeah, yeah,
2019.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
Because
that's a good optimistic way of looking at it. I'll take that.
yes, I've got that Friday feeling. I'm going to try and be optimistic about the group ahead. And it's Champions League
Excellent.
football. That's what Celtic want to be involved in. Obviously, the
Absolutely.
rewards at the end of this season, if they win the domestic the domestic league, is massive due to the expanded Champions League. Effectively, the UEFA sponsored Super League is coming into play with regard to the
Mm.
8 games instead of 6, 4 home and 4 away, and there's games after Christmas regardless in that group stage as well. Games are on till January. I think there's two fixtures on. I heard this the other
Oh,
day.
okay.
So I'm guessing the board have already got an excuse in that regard, where they talk about Europe after Christmas. There will be Europe after Christmas because the group stage is elongated to 8 games. So
Well,
very
the key
interesting.
thing there is, and again, go back to Huddle Breakdown, what I said at the beginning of the season is, whatever happens this season, all I really care about is the league.
Yeah,
Because, exactly as you said, this extended, and again, it's only the details are only just starting to emerge this week. There's actually on Twitter, there's a really good account, Scotland's Coefficient, it's called. I don't know who runs it,
yeah,
but he or she laid out in great detail what the potential impacts are of this new Champions League format, and specifically for the champions, in this case, hopefully Celtic. Um, and the reason that winning the league this season is absolutely paramount is, although Celtic will, as a minimum, clear 30 million euros this year by being in the group stages, and that's before you add in performance money and gate money. Next season, that goes up by at least 40% and could reach like 50 million euros. Now, 50 million euros in the context of Scottish football is game changing. Even for Celtic, it's game changing. So the prospect of either, of both not getting that or gifting it to someone else is just you can't contemplate. So
yeah.
we need to win this league. That's another reason why Sunday's result was so psychologically important, really,
Hmm.
because the the pot of gold at the end of this particular season's rainbow is so game changing that we have to put all our efforts into winning that league.
Probably why they went for a safe pair of hands and Brendan Rodgers to deliver that then, rather than
That
maybe
was
a
my
riskier
thinking. Yeah, that
option.
was my thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
These guys are smart. I know the board get a lot of criticism, but these guys are pretty smart. They'll know what's at stake at the end of this season. So a good start. First international break, and Celtic are 4 points clear. I meant to say there was a comment in there that said they are 4 points clear of Rangers, but Motherwell have had such a great start to the season that they are joint top.
Brilliant,
Celtic are
brilliant.
top on goal difference, but
St Mirren,
Kettlewell,
Motherwell, yeah,
St Mirren,
brilliant.
Motherwell, it's
Good for them.
all these teams are doing really, really well, and that's down to good management off the scenes as well, I would say. So credit to them, they're clearly doing the right thing, and Robinson and Kettlewell are both good managers at that level. So well done to them both.
Definitely.
I think we'll stop off for today. We went for an hour and 2 minutes. I think it's absolutely flown by. I don't know about you, but thank you very much for joining me, Alan. Before we finish off completely, could I just get everyone to have a wee look at the ticker tape again at the bottom of the screen? If you subscribe to the Celtic Way website, you'll be supporting top quality football journalism covering the club you love. If you visit www.celticway.co.uk/subscribe, on there today was a feature that I did where I was speaking to a couple of members of supporters buses on the proposed guidelines from the Traffic Commission. Basically, the rules are shambolic, what could come into play. So I wanted to hear what the fans that were most connected. So I spoke to a governor and founder of a bus to see what he was thinking about it, and the responses were quite colourful, to say the least. So if you want to give that a read, then that is on the website. It should be on the very front of the homepage if you are interested. I'm sure there'll be more pieces coming from Alan over the coming days and weeks. So if you want to get involved, then have a look at them as well. There'll be some on the website. There's still that one that you were talking about today regarding the Celtic performance. Was it good defending or bad attacking from Rangers' point of view? That's still on the homepage of the website. If you want to have a look, it should be a green and blue graphic of Danilo and Liam Scales. If you want to have a look at Alan's piece, it's on the homepage as well. So just before we finish off, Alan, I know I've got plenty of advertising to do at the start and end of these videos, but for anybody who's maybe not as well versed in what you do, where can people find you?
Yeah, Celtic by Numbers on Twitter. Also got my own blog, which I put up occasional pieces, maybe one or two a week at most, sort of thing. But check those out. And then every week we're starting to do a couple of podcasts on the Huddle Breakdown. So follow the Huddle Breakdown on Twitter, find the YouTube channel or wherever it is you consume your podcast, and please subscribe because again, it really helps to grow the channel. Really, it's all the Huddle Breakdown content is free to air, by the way. So you can enjoy it for for nothing. So, but so
Yeah.
even more so, please subscribe at least.
And I will going back into the video description after this video, I'll add some links to your stuff so that people can just easily click onto that. The people that may be tuning in later on, because I know not everybody watches live. So if you are interested, then please look at the description in about 10 minutes time following the end of this video, and I'll put some links in there so you can easily click to those areas that Alan's doing content and pieces for. Thank you very much, Alan, for joining me today. I really do appreciate it. You know, Tony wasn't available today, but you've stepped in, you've been the super sub, and you've performed admirably. So thank you very much.
No, thank you for having me. I am Liam Scales.
Take that. Do you know, after that performance at Ibrox, we'll definitely take it more where that came from. Thank you to everyone in the comments that has joined in and participated in the show. We'll be back on Monday. You know, it's the international break, so I don't think there'll be much stuff to talk about at the weekend unless Celtic surprises. But until Monday, enjoy the start and rest of your weekend, and we'll see you on Monday. Cheers, guys.